In today's video we're going to be having a look at Classic Tweens in Adobe Flash. Now, Classic Tweens are the real basics of animation, and basically all you have to do is specify a start point and an end point for your animation, and Flash will fill in the rest and create a smooth animation for you. A little bit hard to explain, but if I show you some examples now you'll see what I mean by this Classic Tween. Okay, so basically it's movement on the page. So we've got eyes rolling across the screen, we had text flying in, we've got a car driving across the screen, all examples of Classic Tweens. You can also use Classic Tweens to do this fade in and fade out effect. Okay, you can also use it to change the color of certain objects. Okay, all very simple animations, but they are all Classic Tweens, and they are quite handy to use in your app design and even just your animation design. Okay, so we're going to have a look at creating this animation now in Adobe Flash. Okay, so let's open up Flash, and today we're going to start by pressing the ActionScript 3.0 file. Okay, we're going to make a new one of those. It's not a mobile app, this one, just a normal animation. When you're in, go to your magnification window and just choose the Fit in Window option there so you can see the entire stage. The first thing we want to do is change the stage color, so pop on over to your Properties panel, head down to where it says Stage and change the white. I'm going to choose a dark grey for today's animation. Now what we want to do for this first scene is have the words Classic Tween Examples fly onto the screen. It's like a little introductory scene to our animation. I'll just go back to the example and show you it again. Here it is here. Okay, so we want all three pieces of text to fly on, one after the other. The way we do that is we're going to do it on three different layers. The first layer, which is layer 1 here, just double click on that and rename it to the word Classic. We're going to put each of the three words on a different layer. So the first word, grab the text tool from your toolbox, change your font to Roboto and change it to black for the style. That means it's a nice big thick font. I've gone around size 84, 85, that area looks good. And the color you want is a bright color. You can choose. I'm going to go with yellow. And what I'm going to do is just write the word Classic in capital letters. Using my black arrow, I'm going to just move that down a little bit. Okay, so we've got Classic. Now, we want this to fly onto our stage. So what we need to do, as I said earlier, we need to specify the start point of this animation and the end point of this animation, and then let Flash fill in the rest for us to create a nice smooth animation. So we want this text to start off the stage. Okay, so I'm just going to move it off to the side of the stage. So zooming in on that a little bit. Okay, that's off the side of my stage, and we won't be able to see that when the page first loads. Now what I have to do is specify the end point. Okay, and the way we do that is we head down to our timeline down the bottom here. At the moment on frame number 1 we've got that little black dot you can see there. That's a keyframe, and that's the start point of our animation. To specify the end point, we're going to go across our timeline to frame number 10, click on that, and we're going to insert a keyframe. You can either press F6 for the shortcut, you can right click and insert a keyframe, or you can even go up to the insert menu and go to timeline and keyframe. Okay, three different ways there to insert a keyframe, but I think pressing F6 is the quickest way to do it. Okay, since this is our end point for the animation, we want to show Flash where we want this text to finish, or where we want it to end up once it's flown onto our screen. And I want it directly in the middle of the page. The quick way to do that is go to your window menu and select your Align panel. And in your Align panel, make sure you've checked the box that says Align to Stage, and simply press this second button in, which is Align Horizontal Center, and that will push your text into the center of the stage. Alrighty, so looking back at our timeline, on frame number 1 we've got our start point, frame number 10 we've got our end point. To let Flash fill in the gap here to create an animation, you just need to right click your mouse between those two keyframes, go all the way up to Create Classic Tween, and you're done. That's your first animation. So go back to frame 1 and press enter, and you should see the text fly onto the screen. Okay, you can keep pressing enter to see how it works, but once you specify that start point, which is off the stage, and the end point, which is on the stage, Flash does the rest for you. So it's a simple way to make animations. That's our first layer done, so I'm just going to lock that by clicking on the padlock in my layers panel there. And I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to rename it by double clicking on it, and I'm going to call it Tween. Now the next bit, we need to have the word tween fly onto the screen, and I want it to fly on after the word classic has arrived on the stage. So looking at my timeline, we can see that the word classic arrives on our stage at frame 10. So on my tween layer now, I'm going to go across to frame number 10 and press F6 to insert that keyframe. This is going to be the start point for my next animation. So I'm going to grab the text tool from my toolbox, leave the font the same, family, style and size. I'm just going to change the color. I choose a bright pink this time. So on frame number 10, make sure you clicked on number 10, click on your stage and write the word tween. This is the starting point for our next animation. So what I want the word tween to do is fly in from the bottom of the stage. Okay, so I'm just going to move that down the bottom so it's off my stage. That's the starting point. I'm going to go across my timeline to frame number 20 and I'm going to press F6. Now I want this text to be directly in the center of the stage, both horizontally and vertically. So the way we do that is back to our align panel. First of all, horizontally align it in the center, and then come across and vertically align it in the center. And that's now put our text smack bang in the center of the stage. So looking at frame 10, which is the start of our animation, we've got the text off the screen. At frame 20, that's flown onto the screen. So all we need to do now, in between these two keyframes somewhere, right click your mouse and create a classic tween. So if we just go back to frame 10, we can press enter and our text flies up onto the screen. If we play that from the start, you'll see that the word classic disappears. And that's because we told Flash to finish our animation for classic at frame number 10. We need that to stretch out all the way to frame 20. So what I'm going to do is just go back to the classic layer, click on frame 20 and press F5. Okay, F5 inserts a blank frame. You can right click actually and just insert a frame, and that will extend the classic animation to the same length as the tween animation. So you can see on your timeline now, I've just got these frames filled in and the word classic will just sit there and do nothing for those last 10 frames. So let's have a look at this now. Classic flies on, tween flies on, it's looking good. I'm going to lock the tween layer. I'm going to make a new layer. Oops, that should be at the top. And I'm going to double click this final layer, which is layer 3, and I'm going to call it examples. Alrighty, now we want the word examples to fly on and fill in this gap at the bottom of the page. We want it to start after these other two pieces of text have flown onto the screen. So frame 20 is where we're going to start this final bit of animation. So at frame 20, press F6, go and grab your text tool from your toolbar. Font, family, style and size will be the same as before. Just change your color to something nice and bright. And making sure you clicked on frame 20, click on your stage. We're going to write the word examples. Okay, so frame 20 is our starting point, so I'm going to move the text off to the right of the stage. That's going to be where it starts. Frame 30 is where it's going to finish. Okay, so at frame 30 I'm going to press F6 to put a keyframe in. At frame 30, which is the end point for my animation, I simply want this piece of text in the center of my stage here. So I'm going to go up to my align panel, making sure align to stage is still checked. We just want to press this second button, which is align the horizontal center to the middle of the stage. Okay, so that's done. We've got a start point at 20, an end point at frame 30. In between there, right click your mouse and create a classic tween. Okay, let's see if that blue text flies on. It sure does. You might have noticed that the other two pieces of text disappear, and that's because they are finishing at frame 20 at the moment. So what we're going to have to do is go across to frame 30 on both of those layers and press F5, which puts in that blank frame and just extends our animation out for those other two layers. So back at frame 1 now, we should have our animation finished. If we press enter, classic tween examples. They all fly onto the stage, and that's basically our first scene done. What I do want to happen though is for the text just to sit there for a little while so people have time to read it. So what I'm going to do is go along my timeline, probably go up to about frame number 80. And at frame 80 I'm just going to press F5 on each of those three layers. And that extends my animation out just for 1 or 2 seconds longer. Okay, so people have time to read this text. So if I press enter one more time, text flies on and then it just sits there for a little while. People have time to read it, and then it's going to go into the next scene where we create our first little animation. Okay, so that's done. We want to bring in a second scene now. If we look at the example, I'll just play this. After our heading flies in, we've got this little man with his eyes rolling backwards and forwards. So let's start creating that. I'm going to go up to my window menu and I'm going to go all the way down to scene. I want to see what scenes I've got in my animation at the moment. First scene, I'm going to double click on that and give it a name. I'm going to call it, we'll call it splash. Usually the first screen in your animation is the splash screen. We're going to make a new scene after that, which is basically like a new document. So I'm going to hit this little add scene button here. So scene 2 appears, and we're going to call this one face. It's going to be the face of a man with his eyes rolling backwards and forwards. Okay, so I'm just going to close that off. At the top I'll choose fit in window so I can see all my stage. And what I'm going to do in layer 1 is rename it to head. We're going to draw the bloke's head first of all. So in your toolbox I want you to grab your oval tool, and I want you to choose a skin color for your fill color. So I'm going to go down and choose that creamy kind of color. Holding shift, I'm just going to click and drag across the page and draw a perfect circle. Looks something like that. You can use your black arrow to pick it up and just shift it around, or you can just go to your align tab here and just horizontally and vertically align that circle in the center of the page. Okay, so this is going to be our little man's head. On the head layer, I want you to lock that now, make another new layer, and we're going to call this layer features. We're going to draw some things on this head now, like the hair, the nose, the smile, stuff like that. The eyes need to be a bit separate from the head. So let's start drawing those features in. First features, maybe his hair would be good, so using the oval tool, I'm just going to select brown hair for this guy. I'm going to draw a skinny little oval. Looks something like that. Once I've drawn it, I'm going to grab my free transform tool here, third tool down in the toolbox, click on that shape and just give it a rotate a couple of times. Try and get it to line up perfectly on the side of his head here. May need to use your arrow keys to nudge it around a bit. Basically you're looking for his hair to sit nicely like that on the side of his head. You can press Ctrl C to copy that. I'll just go up to edit copy and go edit. Just paste in center, that'll do. Now we want to flip that around the other way so it's a mirror image of that piece of hair. So you can either right click on it, go to transform, flip it horizontally, or I think you can go up to modify, transform, flip horizontally. You want to get this up here, use your guides to try and position that in a similar position as the other piece of hair. Okay, so he's a little bald man with just some patches of hair around the side of his head. After we've done the hair, we might draw the mouth. So we're going to grab our line tool here and select black for our color. Should be just size 1 for the stroke and a solid line. Holding shift, I'm going to draw a straight line across here. And then I'm going to hold the control key down and you'll see that my mouse cursor changes when I roll over the top of the line. Okay, that's not holding control. Holding control will allow you to click and drag that line down and make a smile. You want a reasonably big smile because we're going to draw some teeth and even a little bit of the mouth on this guy's face. Once you've done the first line, I want you to draw a second line which will connect the mouth up like so. And we're going to drag this one down roughly to about, we'll say there. And then one more line connecting his mouth up again. And then hold Control and just bring that down a little bit too. Alrighty, so the top part of his mouth here are his teeth. So you can grab your fill bucket now, choose white as your colour and colour in his teeth. For the bottom part, it's going to be the inside of his mouth, so you want a pretty dark red kind of colour, probably something like that. Now to make this a little bit more realistic, you want to draw a little tongue on his inside his mouth there. So I'm going to zoom in a bit and just get back to his mouth here. To draw the tongue, you could do it using the pen tool or the line tool. I might just use the line tool today. What I'm going to do is just draw like an M shape. And using the Control key, so I'll just hold down the Control key, I'm able to pick those lines up and give them a bit of a bend and just make them a little bit rounder so they're not quite as pointed. That'll look a bit more realistic that way. Try and avoid any points in the tongue if you can. Alright, so hopefully that looks a bit like a tongue. You can grab your fill bucket now and choose a colour for the tongue, probably a slightly lighter colour to the background there. So let's try one of these reddish kind of colours. Yeah, that looks good. If I zoom back out now, bit of a rough looking tongue there, probably a little bit too big if anything, but I'm sure you can make yours look a little bit better than what I have. Anyway, I'll leave it like that for now. Another thing we can draw is the nose. I'm just going to use the line tool for that. Simply draw a straight line going down his face, and then holding Control you can click and drag that nose out to make something like that. You can even grab the end points and move them around if you want. That's all you need for a nose. And I just want to draw the back of the eyes here. So I'm going to use black stroke, white fill colour, and I'm going to draw some eyes. If you want the perfect circle, hold Shift. I might do that for this one. Once you've drawn one circle, grab your black arrow and you're going to click on the white part and then hold Shift and click on the black stroke. Press Ctrl C to copy, or go up to Edit and copy, and then Ctrl V to paste, or go up to Edit and paste in center. And that way you've got both the same eyes. Just move it off to the other side there. So you should have a face looking something like that. Okay, once you have, just lock that into position, and we're going to make one more new layer down the bottom here. Give it the name Eyes. Because we are animating the eyes, we want to have them on a different layer to everything else. Everything else in the background here is just sitting still. Okay, but the eyes, they move separately to the face, so we want to have them on their own layer down here. Now draw the eyes, just grab your oval tool again, turn your stroke off, and just select a colour for your eyes. I think black's going to look fine for this. Holding Shift, you can draw some little eyeballs looking out to the left. Once you draw one, you can copy it, pressing Ctrl C and press Ctrl V to paste it. Just try and move it into the same position on the other eye. Okay. Once you've got both of the eyes drawn in and they're looking out to the left, I want you to click on this eyes layer once. I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see what that does. When you do click on the eyes layer, it will select the eyes, and you'll see a slight dotted pattern in the background of the eyes to show they're both selected. Once they are selected, you want to go up to Modify and Convert to Symbol. If you want to animate something other than text, usually you need to convert it to a symbol first of all. Okay. When you convert it to a symbol, you want to give it a name like Eyes, and we're going to leave it as either a movie clip or a graphic. Okay, to keep things simple, I'll just leave it as movie clip, and we'll click on OK. If you've done everything correct, you should get a blue box around the outside of those eyes. Okay, and that shows that it's now ready to be animated. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start to animate these eyes. I'm going to just zoom out a little bit here. Okay, what we want the eyes to do is roll to the right and then back to the left, to the right and then back to the left. Okay, so there's a few different stages of our animation here. First one, we're starting at frame 1 and they're looking out to the left. At frame 20, we want them looking out to the right. So I'm going to go down to my timeline, and on the eyes layer here, I'm going to press F6 on frame 20. That makes a keyframe, or the end point of our animation. Because our features and our head layers only last for one frame, we're going to need to extend them out to frame 20. So highlight both the head and the features layer at frame 20 and press F5 just to put in a blank frame. There's no animation going on the features or the head layer, so that's why we just press F5. Now back up to our eyes layer, because we are animating that. We've got our first keyframe at frame 1, our finishing keyframe at frame 20. We just need to move the eyes. I'm going to use my arrow keys to do this, and just move them so they look out to the right. Okay, so frame 1 looking to the left, frame 20 looking out to the right. Right click anywhere between those two keyframes and make a classic tween. You should have your first animation. So let's go back to the start and press enter. Those eyes move nicely across the page. What we're going to do now is go across to frame 40 and repeat that process, but the eyes are just going to move back to the left. Okay, so frame 40, I'm going to press F6 on the eyes layer. That puts in a new end position. So it starts at frame 20 now, with our eyes looking out to the right. By frame 40, we want them looking back to the left. Now we just need to extend our head and our features layers again. So let's just press F5 or insert a blank frame up on frame 40. Now back on the eyes layer, press that end keyframe there, the finishing keyframe. Use your arrows just to move those eyes back, looking out to the right. Now somewhere between frame 20 and 40, just right click your mouse and make a classic tween. So now we should have our eyes look to the right and look back to the left. Okay, we want that to repeat one more time. Okay, so looking a little bit further up the timeline, we're at frame 40 now with a new starting position. Eyes looking out to the left. By frame 60, let's press F6, we want those eyes moving back to the right. I'll just press F5 on the features and the head layer just to bring them back up. Okay, so now on frame 60, using my arrow keys, I'm just going to nudge those eyes out towards the right. And then somewhere between those two keyframes, we're going to create a classic tween. Alright, so let's have a look at that. We'll just make sure between 40 and 60. Yeah, it's looking good. Alrighty, so a little bit further up. This is going to be the last part of animation now. Frame 60 is the starting point. We just want those eyes back to the left. So go to frame 80. Press F6 to put a keyframe in. Down below it, press F5 and F5 on the features and the head layer. Alrighty, so on this final keyframe, click on it on the eyes layer and move those eyes back to the left. Right click your mouse between those keyframes, make a classic tween. We should be looking pretty good now. So back right at the start on frame 1, I'm going to press enter. The eyes roll back and forwards, looking good. Once those eyes finish in that position, I want them to sit there just for a little while, maybe just 20 more frames. So what I'm going to do is go up to frame 100, and on all three layers I'm just going to press F5. That inserts a blank frame, which means no animation is taking place. It's just going to sit there for a little bit longer. So by the time our animation finishes, the eyes just sit there for about a second or two before going on to the next scene. Okay, I'm going to stop the video here. I think we've done enough for this first part. In the second part of the video, we will finish off this animation. Okay, so just go to File and Save As. We want to save what we've got so far. Okay, I'm just going to save mine in the Classic Tweens folder. You can give it a name, like Classic Tweens. I just called mine Example. And that will do us for this video. Okay, I'll see you in the second part when we finish off this animation completely.